Hey guys, it's Kyle coming at you from Bane's Film Reviews. I am here with my second of my interview series. I'm very excited to have across from me Paul Schuyler, the writer, director, and one of the stars of the horror film Red River Road. Thank you so much for taking some time to sit down with me and talk about the film and what's been going on. So, just to get started off, what's this journey been like? How's it been getting this whole movie put together, and what's all that been like?
Um, Super rewarding, soul crushing, pretty much what making movies is.
Yeah.
I think I've had every, you know, emotion experience throughout this whole thing. I mean, in all seriousness, it's been an amazing thing, to go through, especially with my family and to have this time capsule, of us at this specific time because our kids just went away to college.
Okay.
Yeah. So to kind of lock that in, sort of our last hurrah as a family before they go off. So all the other stuff, the setbacks, all those things, they just add to it being a satisfying.
Yeah, yeah. So that's
Yeah.
kind of an interesting time that you ended up doing it right before they went away to college.
Yeah.
What was like the ultimate high? I would assume it's having that time capsule, as you mentioned, but are there some other really high points in making it?
Yeah. I think, when we finally got to screen it in our town, so there's a movie theater here that I run, and
Okay.
we had been telling people, on Facebook, like, we're making this movie. It's at film festivals. They took the journey, this community took this journey with us. So to finally, screen it for them. And we had a ton of sold out shows and it was really successful. And just to finally share that with an audience on a really nice screen with a really good sound system. Um, we were at some film festivals that were amazing, but when you show it in the town that you live in and people know you and know us as a family, it
Right.
was super cool.
That's very, very cool. And I want to jump to a question that I didn't plan on asking until later, but you mentioned with having really good sound. So sound played a really important part in this film. I mean, the rustling of the bushes outside and just the absolute void of silence at certain points to Brody barking that all played an integral part in the film. Was that always the intention, or did that kind of just come to be naturally and you loved it and stuck with it?
When I was at film school, my first year, I had an editing teacher that he was such a stickler for sound. And he said
Mm,
sound can make or break a movie. And I guess that just planted a seed because it's always like in the forefront for me as such an integral part of conveying the story. And it drives me nuts sometimes watching like a big budget movie with terrible sound. Like there's a lot
mm,
going on and they spend a lot of money on it, but it's not like there's a scene in The Game with Michael Douglas,
okay.
comes home from work and it's his birthday and the maid has left him like a cheeseburger or something. And I remember he picks up it's like a dish covering and he picks it up and just the clink and the echo, that's in that house. Like it's so realistic and so
Mm,
just sets the scene. Um, that to me is great sound. And then
okay.
so see like an explosion and see stuff flying and you can see it landing and there's no sound to it.
Mm,
It's like, I don't need the explosion. I need the reality of it. So I
right.
knew that, yeah, for this film, and especially in horror films lean so heavily on sound, how much you can do to build the mood or yeah. So always at the forefront for me.
Yeah, and it did such a you did such a fantastic job of building suspense with the sound, and sometimes it was a complete absence of sound. But like you said, it really does make or break a film, and I think that was really one of the more integral parts and one of the reasons it was so successful, in my opinion.
Thank you. So can
Of
I
course.
let me jump in on something. I thought, oh, we're in a lockdown, everyone's shut away in their house. Like it's gonna be super easy to film this. And it was so noisy. Like I legit
Really?
had to just create almost everything you hear from scratch because
Wow.
you could hear cars, you could hear lawnmowers. So yeah, trying to find just like wind with no other sound behind it
Mm,
was kind of brutal. So
yeah.
I'm
Well,
glad you recognize that there was some work put into it because there was a
oh
lot.
yeah, it was pulled off very, very well. So kudos to
Thank
you for that, for sure.
you.
Um, so I got a little sidetracked because you mentioned the sound, but one of the questions I just wanted to ask you: how did you get into film in the first place? Why was this something that's so important to you in general?
So I think I was 5 years old and my parents came in, they sat me down and they were very serious. And they said, we were going to go to the movies, but our babysitter canceled. now this isn't a cartoon, this is a grown-up movie. Do you think you could go and sit quietly, and not be a nuisance? And I was like,
Mm.
sure. So he took me to see The Towering Inferno, and it just blew my mind. Like, I was like, I don't know what just happened, but whatever this is, that's what I want to do. And then I think a year later, Jaws came out, and that just sealed the deal. I've just
Yeah,
been obsessed with film since.
very cool. Very, very cool. Yeah, I have a similar story that when I got into film, Star Wars. I love Star Wars. And my dad, he worked a lot. He wasn't absent by any means, but he just worked. He worked night shifts and didn't get a lot of time to hang out. And when they re-released Star Wars in theaters before they did the prequel series, he took me to all the midnight showings, and I just became obsessed with it because it was just such an important part of my life
Oh yeah.
that really got me into it.
Yeah. So I saw Star Wars when it first came out.
Okay.
When it was just like we just went like, oh, what's this movie? And then
Mm,
Star Wars. And
right.
afterwards it's just like, okay, my DNA is completely rearranged now.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I enjoyed it anyway, but just having that time to spend with my dad just made it that much better.
Yeah.
Um, and then, so for this film specifically, I'm sure that COVID played an important role in coming up with the idea and things like that. But was this brewing before COVID hit, and that just kind of snowballed? It snowballed into this thing, or how did it come to be?
No, we actually had a movie called The Tuna Goddess that we were set to shoot in August of 2020. We had it cast, Jenna Malone, Chris McDonald, Kathleen Quinlan. We had money, like we were ready to
Wow.
go. And then COVID just wiped that out, like just ended it. And it
Yeah.
was literally the first day of lockdown. I was like, I can't, if I got to just sit in this house and be depressed that we got this close, I'm going to lose my
Mm.
mind. So I was like, well, we all act, we're all trained actors. I have the equipment. What if we shot a movie in the house? And that night I had a dream that was literally the movie. Like I just woke up like,
Wow.
oh, start writing it down. And within 10 days, we had the script and like a week of pre-production, and then we were off and running. So we shot it like right as that was all happening. So
Mm.
it's kind of rich, which I think you can tell with that paranoia at the time, that we're
Yes.
all like, what is going to happen? Yeah. I mean, now we're 2 years later. So it's like we have, it's a cold now, basically.
But yeah, we all get it. It's all relevant to what every single person across the globe experienced it. So it's so relevant, and it just touches home for everybody. Rarely do you find a film that I think hits everybody, but
Right.
this is one of those films that has the ability to do that. Um, I love that the family was part of it. Everybody was involved. Um, and you mentioned the paranoia, which was kind of another one of my questions. Was the intention to focus on things like paranoia? And I feel like there's somewhat of a social commentary in there with the paranoia with the internet and things like that. Was that intentional for the film, or was that just something that you as a parent experienced?
Honestly, I added the whole thing about it spread to the internet because I just wanted to cut this family off. And I thought
Mm,
if they couldn't use their phones or communicate with the outside world, that's really cut off.
mm,
I was more thinking like I love the movie The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing.
mm,
So I was sort of had that in the back of my brain. It wasn't until later and I was editing it. And then much later when we started screening it and people reacted to it, I was like, oh, the whole social media echo chamber, people choose their own reality. That must have
mm.
just been brewing in my subconscious because it's there, but it wasn't intentional.
Okay.
And I think it's sort of I feel like people bring themselves to this movie. Like no two reactions are quite the same because I think
Right.
there's and rightly so, because it's how we built the movie to leave that space for the viewer to show up. So people that are very politically minded see the political message really
Mm,
strongly, more than I
mm.
intended or even really want it to be there. Um, I did have one distributor approach me, and his first question was, "Are you like a crazy right winger?" And I was like, "No." He's like, "Well, it's kind of in there a little bit." I was like, "I guess if you want to look for it,
It,
but I'm
it,
not."
it it wasn't something that I picked up the first time. When I rewatched some clips today, that's when I picked up on that part of it.
Yeah,
And that's why I wasn't sure if it was intentional or not, because it was not obvious. It was incredibly subtle, but it worked to help tell that story. And I liked that you mentioned them being cut off from the rest of the world, because like I said, it was so relevant to what everybody was experiencing. But that juxtaposition, that was completely the opposite of what we were experiencing. For the first time, I didn't know what Zoom was until COVID hit. I didn't know how to do these things. I'm a teacher. I didn't know that I could teach from home and still be successful in doing it. So it was interesting to see that it was completely separate from what we had experienced for those almost, I think it was like 27 months or something before we got back to normal, even like at
Quote
school.
unquote
And I,
normal. Yeah.
right, yeah, quote unquote normal. Um, but it all worked so well. Even the unintentional things worked very well with it. Um, and then I wanted to touch on, like, the obvious star of this, Brody. Um, I can't get, so I don't have any dogs. We watch my parents' dogs from time to time. I can't get them to come when I call them.
Right.
How do you get Brody to participate in this film and like actually play in a pivotal role in this?
Yeah. Treats. So she's a really smart dog. She's part husky.
Mm,
And in the original script, I think she had 2 scenes. And when we shot those, she was just so easy to work with.
okay.
So we were like, what else can we get her to do? And we just kept adding things for her to do and adding things for her to do. And the one that impressed me the most is there's a shot where she comes downstairs and walks into the kitchen and she needs to sit down in a close up and find her light. And she did it on the
Okay.
first take.
Yeah.
It was crazy. Like I was like, she's just a born star. Now, of course, we've spoiled her rotten because she just follows us around. Like, am I getting a treat now? Am I getting a treat
Right, right.
now? Yeah, she's a
Uh,
diva.
yeah. Well, she worked very well. I
Yeah,
imagine that had to be one of the biggest obstacles, or what should have been one of the
it
biggest
should have been. Yeah,
obstacles.
she
Yeah,
was not at all.
yeah,
Yeah,
and it worked very well. That's awesome. But that's another one of the things, especially with COVID. First of all, filmmaking is difficult in general. I think it was Scorsese. Somebody told me Scorsese said that directors are essentially problem solvers, and I imagine that the number of problems that you had to solve throughout this filming process were just magnificent.
yeah.
So, what was the most difficult thing? What seemed to be the most common thing that kind of just lingered on and on?
I think, like logistically shooting, the two biggest problems that we kept coming up against was, first of all, what do we do with all of our stuff? Like we live
Mm,
in this house.
mm,
So we were constantly like, all right, we're shooting in the kitchen. So we got to clear the kitchen. So all of a sudden, all the rooms off the kitchen just became, mountains of junk. And it's like, all right, now we got to move it into the kitchen because we're shooting in the living room. So there was a constant sort of like shell game
mm,
going on. Where are we going to put everything? And then the other thing, like I said before, I thought, well, we're shooting, this movie during COVID. We're gonna be able to go out and get shots of like empty streets, and nope, there were people everywhere. I don't know if it's because we're on Cape Cod and everyone decided to escape here
mm,
from Boston, but there was just mobs of people everywhere we went. So what we thought was going to be super easy was a real slog, and we'd
yeah,
constantly have to like wait for the exact like 10 seconds where nobody's in view and like go 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 shoot. So those are kind of the two big ones during filming. Um, and then the biggest one during post was my hard drive crashed and
oh,
wiped out the entire first rough edit.
oh my goodness,
And I had to like piece it back together. And for like 2 weeks, my computer was being bizarre. And I finally got it all sorted out and got DaVinci like working again and got
mm,
it basically put back together enough that I could move forward. But that was 2 weeks of like, I don't think I can go on. Like,
yeah.
it's just not worth it. And my wife's like, what are you going to do? Just not finish it? And I was like, okay, fine.
I
Back
mean,
to
at
it.
that point, what else were you gonna do?
Right. But it was 2 weeks of definitely like, it's not worth it.
No, that makes sense. I Stuff like that just throws me off course. So I can't imagine having thrown your heart and soul into this for so long and then it just not being there anymore.
Yeah.
Um,
I
did you
have to say,
find your
if you want to make movies, you better be prepared to just go past every bit of discomfort and adversarial, things that the world throws at you.
Mhm.
To the point almost like, am I insane? Like I must be a crazy person to just keep pushing forward. You just keep pushing forward until it's done, I
Yeah,
think. And I think a lot of people who would love to make movies don't realize that it being that hard is sometimes part of it. And you just gotta put your, put your head down and just grind through it.
yeah. I had considered just temporarily writing a script, and
Yeah.
that alone was just too much. I don't have the kind of time for that. So the fact that I couldn't dedicate that much time to a script, I figured there's no point in me disappointing a bunch of people and trying to make an entire film. Um,
Never say never.
yeah, never say never. Maybe one day we'll see. But
Yeah.
I'm enjoying this aspect of cinema more than the writing process.
Yeah.
So
Which is great.
um,
Kudos.
thank you. Um, but so I'm trying to think how I wanted to word this. I'll come back to it so I don't mess it up.
Yeah.
Um, so with this now being out, like, what has it been like since? I mean, I know you said you screened for your town and you did things like that. What is the process? I mean, I'm assuming I can't be the only person that's reached out and said, "Hey, can you sit down with me?" What has this been like? Or maybe I am the only person.
Nope,
I don't know.
you're not. I've had a couple of interviews. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, we're a little teeny tiny movie. We don't have any studio backing.
Mm,
Um, Distributors tend to pick up a lot of movies like ours and just put them out on streaming because they have the pipeline.
mm,
They don't put a lot of marketing, zero marketing behind it. They're relying on the filmmaker to get the word out and use social media and sort of
mm,
guerrilla. Um, so we're just sort of crossing our fingers and hoping that people find it. I know from experience that if this is the kind of movie you like, this sort of like thinking horror movie,
yeah.
you're gonna really like it. It's done really, there's a very specific audience for it that really enjoys it. Um, so it's just the hope that it finds its way to them. And people like
Right.
you help, to sort of get the word out and
Mm.
yeah. So
Well,
we're gonna wait.
I'm glad I get to help.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really am. Um, and then what are the plans going forward beyond this, beyond Red River Road?
So obviously Tuna Goddess is still sort of sitting there.
Okay.
We're gonna revisit that at some point. The problem is it takes place out on the water, and I'm committed to shooting it on the water, which makes the budget go up. And then still,
Sure.
there's still a lot of COVID restrictions you have to deal with. And that really makes it hard to do independent film just because,
Mm,
now you're just really multiplying costs that are normally here. Now you got to have people quarantine for a week. And so, anyways,
sure.
we'll come back to that. We have a lower budget film called Wasted that was in script form and sort of in pre-production before Tuna Goddess. We might go back to that. And
Okay.
yeah, and I've got
And
two horror scripts that they haven't quite. Sometimes they take much longer, like 10 days to write this. That's not usually how it works.
yeah.
I have two that are like 3/4 of the way there. They just haven't like found their footing yet. So
Okay.
yeah, hopefully we'll have
Well,
something soon.
I'm looking forward to them. If they're half as good as this, I really am looking forward to it. Um, I know that indie films and films of this nature aren't necessarily everybody's forte, but for those that do like this, like you said, I really do think they'll enjoy it. I think they'll find something to appreciate. Uh, like everybody's had to deal with this, like I said, over the past few years. So I'm hoping that people have the opportunity to see it. I'm hoping that people have the opportunity to at least read about it and help promote it in one way or another. Because I was fortunate enough to have someone send me the screener. Where can everyone else find this?
It's on Amazon. It's on Vudu. It's on iTunes. It's on the major streaming platforms for
Okay.
rent or for buy.
Okay. Very, very cool. And then I have a question that is not relevant to the movie at all, but I'm always curious to see what different filmmakers say. I'm always curious some of your favorite films?
Jaws, definitely my all-time
Mm,
favorite. Seven Samurai
okay.
is amazing. Kurosawa is, it's funny. I grew up loving Spielberg until I saw a Kurosawa film. I was like, oh, that's
Right.
where Spielberg was inspired by this guy. So now let me
Yeah.
just explore this guy. I just did a film festival here at our theater. It was a month long of just classic movies. So I got to
Oh,
see
cool.
a bunch of my favorites. And I watched the 4K restoration of Apocalypse Now. And
Wow.
on the big screen, it just reminded me like how amazing a piece of cinema that film is. So that's
Hmm.
definitely up there. There's a movie that we used a clip of in Red River Road, a movie called Ninth Configuration.
Okay.
That's a hidden gem. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
No. No.
William Blatty, who wrote The Exorcist, he
Hmm.
directed it. See if you can find it. It's
I will.
interesting movie. That's a hidden gem.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I'm
those are
open to anything and everything.
Yeah.
I haven't seen Seven Samurai in a long, long time. It's probably been 7 or 8 years, and I really want to watch it with my wife, and
Yeah.
that's not her thing at all. She she doesn't like horror films. She doesn't like the indie kind of thing. She doesn't like the old school. She hates films in black and white. Um, but I'm gonna try to get her to sit down for a long time and watch that.
So when I was first dating my wife, Jade,
Mm,
I said, I have a movie I want to show you. It was shot in 1954. It's 3+ hours long. It's in black and white. It's in Japanese. It's subtitled. And she's like, what? I said, give it 5 minutes. If you want to shut it off after 5 minutes, I'm happy to shut it off. 3.5 hours later, she was like, that might be the greatest movie I've ever seen.
awesome,
And
very
it
cool.
might be her favorite movie now.
Really.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. So when I before I became a teacher, when I was working in education, one of the students I worked with had a film class, and that was one of the first films they watched. These are high schoolers, some 14, 15 years old, and they sat there silently for 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
I was so impressed. That was the first time I had seen it. So I was not only impressed by the film, but I was so impressed by how these kids were receptive to it. It that was another reason I got into film, was sitting with those kids and seeing how what a big role it played in their lives and things like that. Hearing the conversations they had
Yeah,
at
totally.
such a young age. Yeah,
Well, it comes down to
very, very cool.
characters. That movie, the characters are so indelible and their
Yeah.
dynamics. You're just so sucked into like what they're up against and who they are.
Hmm.
I think it overcomes all those barriers of the subtitles, of the black and white, of it being so old.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure. Incredibly well done. We'll never see anything quite like it again.
Yeah.
Um, but that's a good thing. We'll keep it that way. We don't need a reboot of that.
Yeah, no. Actually, dream of all dreams would be to reshoot it.
Yeah.
Like go to Japan and reshoot like in Japanese, and
Okay.
not that that's like, sure, I'd love to remake Jaws just so I could do it. I wouldn't want anyone to see it.
Yeah.
I mean, just
Just
for
to
me
say you
to
were
just,
able to.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
just
Very, very cool.
to play in that sandbox.
Uh, um, and then, so again, I want to thank you for taking the time to sit down with me. Where can they find you, or would you rather them just find the film?
They can find the film, and to find me, I mean, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, TikTok.
Okay.
If you search for by my name, I'll come up. Or White Shark Media
Okay.
is a company, and that's
Okay.
WYTSHARK. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you again. I can't say it enough. Congratulations to you and your family on making this fantastic movie. I'm glad to be a part of it. I'm glad that I now have a second chance to help promote it. And I'm looking forward to spreading the word.
Awesome. I really appreciate it. Thanks for
Of
having me.
course.
Yeah.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
You have a fantastic day. Thanks so much.
Take care.